I'm sorry, I was quick on my toes, I was sharp, I was ready, I could answer the questions, and one of them I went in after 5 hours of interviewing, right? That just like, guys were just hitting me. I nailed it, and I got the job offer, and the next day, I'd already had these other interviews lined up, so I went into another bank, 5 more hours of interviewing, and I got another offer, and they just started coming, and I attribute that to the fact that, you know, I paid a dear price, but attribute to the fact of learning from other people and finally being able to bring all these tricks and strategies into learning to market myself and to sell myself to a potential employer. And the one thing I will say is that I honestly don't think there's any better investment time-wise that you can spend than learning how to market yourself. You just spent, think how many hundreds of hours you just spent getting an education and getting a major, and now it's all going to boil down to telling somebody about that. What did you actually learn? You know, what did you get out of that? So, so that's kind of what we're going to do today, and I hope to really get into the nitty-gritties and some of the details on what kind of strategy you should take for interviewing. So, you know, I'd pull out a pen and paper and let's launch into this. Okay, so the first thing, we're going to go over a number of principles. I'll just tell you briefly where we're going to be headed, and then we'll kind of drill down deeper. First, we're going to talk about identifying the top 5 skills that a potential employer in the industry that you're looking for, right, what he would want, you know, what he's looking for in an employee. So, you know, well, yeah, so we'll identify the 5 skills. Next thing we want to do or talk about is how do you link each of the different bullet points in your resume to those 5 skills. Okay? Next, we're going to talk about actually sharing stories. So every time they throw a question at you, whether it's from your resume or not from your resume, you share a story, okay, and to provide an example. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Usually it's going to come from your resume. That leads us to the last point where you share a story to provide an example, to give to substantiate what you're saying, to back it up. And then you connect the dots. You tie it all together. So you don't let the interviewer infer what he's supposed to take away from that story. You tell him what he's supposed to take away. So you tell him exactly what skills and what what attributes or whatever it is that you learned from doing that experience. Okay, so that's kind of where we're headed. And then lastly, for those that are in marketing, we're also going to talk about in the interview, how do you close the interview? Because there's kind of a specific way to actually kind of close it that somebody, and especially who's looking for a marketing guy, that they're going to like that because you're using the very techniques that they're going to want you to use after they employ you. So, okay, so the first thing, what happens is when you think about, if you had to rank the top 25 skills, right, that let's even say the top 50 that an employer is looking for, okay? So I'm coming to hire someone, and I've ranked the top 50 things that is the ideal employee, right? The top maybe 6, 7, 8 hold 90% of the weight. Okay, what I mean is those are the ones that without those, it's kind of like it's not going to happen. And with those, they're going to be able to look past all kinds of shortcomings and weaknesses. So what we want to do, though, is so in everything that we say and everything we bring out, we want to tie it, and we only want to talk about those 5 principles. When I say principles, they're going to be skills or qualities, and we're going to do an exercise a second on the board. So, because the thing is like, you don't want to spend time. You only get 30 minutes to sell yourself, right? You don't want to spend time on things that don't hold a lot of weight or not as much weight. So, and here's the thing is like, when somebody asks you a question, you're not there. It's really important to understand that you're not there to answer questions in an interview. One of the reasons I originally just had a really problem interviewing is because I was sitting there trying to research all the questions they could potentially ask me and trying to be bulletproof, like, oh, you didn't stump me. I was able to come up with answers. But answering a question is not good enough. You have to sell yourself. Okay, so it's the difference between taking an offensive approach versus a defensive approach in an interview. And without preparation, inevitably, our intuition is to take a defensive approach. Try to answer their questions so we don't look dumb, rather than taking every question they have and taking the opportunity to spin it and bring out a skill or quality that we have that we know is important for them. Does that make sense? So that's kind of thing. Now, the one thing I will say is when we identify the 5 the 5 skills that we're just going to identify here in a second, you don't have to keep saying those 5 skills over and over, those same 5 words. Find synonyms for each of the words. So for example, if one of the qualities we're trying to be out is hardworking, you don't have to keep saying over and over, oh, I'm so hardworking, I'm very hardworking. You can use words like, I'm very hardworking, I take a lot of initiative, I really, I know how to work until the very end when a project gets done. So, there's ways to use lots of synonyms as opposed to using the same word over and over. But the idea is you have 5 kind of categories or concepts that you're trying to drive home. So this is what I want to do. I need a volunteer. I need someone in the room to pick a job that they're very interested in, that they're kind of trying to pursue right now. Actually, I'll take a couple people. But is there someone here that's like pursuing a job or even like a dream job? What's an industry or something? What do you?
Private equity.
Private equity. That's awesome. That's actually right up my field. Okay, so private equity. I'm going to see if we have another example because I'm not sure a lot of people know what that is. Is there any other, like, what's a job that someone else here is kind of would love to, like, as a dream job?
I'm looking into Lockheed Martin.
You're looking into what?
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin. Nice. Any other ones? Producer of a television station. Let's run with one of these. Which one should we do? Should we do the producer of a television station? Should we just run with that one? This one's going to be hard because I don't know a lot about that, but I guess it'll be more exciting because we'll be learning together. Because I honestly don't know anything about producing a television station. Okay, so actually this one might actually be too hard, but let's give it a shot. What do you guys think? And this is just generic, and this might not be the right answer, but it's going to be pretty close. Because believe me, when you get a crowd like this and you start brainstorming, you're able to come up with pretty much the skills that you would think that an employer is looking for. Okay, so in producing, what was it again you said? A television producer? Okay, so that's her dream job. What's one critical skill that an employer would be looking for if you're going to be a television producer? You tell me. What? Leadership. I love it. I think is that what you said? Yep. Okay, so leadership is going to be one of ours. And why do you think leadership's key? Yeah, you're leading people, right? You're kind of like the big man. You're up there. Everyone's looking at you. You've got a lot of attention and stuff. And you're going to have to do a lot of organizing and so forth, especially people and resources. Okay? What other skills?
You have to be really decisive.
Decisive. That's pretty good. Did you have to pick a word I'm not sure how to spell? Okay. Self-starter. Okay, I love that. That's good. I am going to actually, we're going to put a synonym right here because just synonyms are coming to mind now. Someone who's got a lot of initiative, right? Proactive. So these are all going to be synonyms, and they're all going to be words that we can use to convey this concept. Okay, so we have like initiative. We have, what did I say? Proactive. Proactive. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. What are some other ones they're going to be looking for? Here's one I just thought of. I don't know if it's good. What a television producer is going to be someone who's very creative. Someone who's very creative. Or does that fall under one of these, or do you think that's separate? It might be separate. So let me write that over here. So organizational skills, right? Is this marker showing up, or is it too light? Barely showing up. That's okay. We got the concept. And is there any other thing? Any other principle? Fire away. Oh, that's key, right? In fact, I can't believe it. So we're going to put communication. I'm going to put / interpersonal skills, right? I think that kind of falls under the same thing. Okay. So how many do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is there any of these that we can potentially combine? We could do 6. I think it's kind of hard to sell that many in an interview. 5's a little bit easier, but we could keep it at 6. Is there any of these we can combine or do away with that might be detracting from what we really want to drive home? Yeah, okay. Let's go like that, okay? And that can kind of be, that could actually be, you could see how you could link those together. And yeah, they could definitely be coupled together. Especially if you tell a good story, you could talk about how your strong organizational skills, you're able to make decisions, keep things in order, whatever.
All those kind of fall under the umbrella of leadership.
Yeah, I agree. I think they all kind of channel through leadership. So maybe this one, and in fact, I'm going to talk about in a second also how I like to have one of the 5 that's the one that I feel most like proud and confident in selling. And I'll talk why in a little bit, but I like to have one that's kind of like the leading principle, one that you feel is maybe your biggest strength. Now, clearly, we don't want to sit there and just list any skills. We want to also be thinking of what skills we have that they're looking for, but we're just doing it this way right now because, you know, I don't know every single one of you individually, okay? Okay, so we've listed them, right? And we're going to be taking an offensive approach as opposed to a defensive approach. Now, the next thing we do is we start linking every point in our resume, every bullet in our resume. We're going to start to think of a little story or some way when they talk about it, at least each experience, but hopefully every bullet. When they ask about something, we're going to say to ourselves, how could I link that to one of these skills? And if you're going down your resume and you're coming across some bullets and you say, there's no human way to link this to one of these skills, it probably shouldn't be on your resume, okay? Because it's detracting from what's most important. And that's what I'm talking about. You only want to have the things on there that hold the most weight. So let me just throw out a couple examples and let's work together. Let's take the mission, for example. Okay? Mission. How could you, using different stories, how could you link your mission? Which of these principles could you link your mission to? Leadership. That one's pretty obvious. Why leadership? If you're ever a district leader, zone leader, you know, I don't know if you're a branch president, if you were giving interviews for baptism, anything, right? You can link those all to leadership. You can talk about how you held meetings, set goals, had follow-up, evaluations, taken statistics, reporting them to your managers. Okay? If you're a district leader, you can use the word regional manager or something, right? That's kind of an equivalent. It's putting in terms of a non-member that he can understand. So leadership's great. What else could you link a mission to? Communication's key, right? You can talk about how you were giving speeches to large congregations of whatever, 200 or 300 people, and you were, you know, giving presentations, teaching them important principles that you believe in, like honesty and ethics and stuff like that, right? Anybody can relate with that. You don't necessarily have to talk about the church, but you can talk about some of the principles and values that you did on a mission. So, and aside from that, you can talk about how your companion, where you're saying, you know what's interesting about the organization within in this service mission that I did, we were stuck with guys. I was given like we call it a companion, but basically a partner that I worked with at all times. And the interesting thing is we didn't necessarily get to select our partner. So here we are working together, you know, around the clock. And we learned to take 2 very different backgrounds and personalities and mesh. And we became a strong team. Let me tell you some of the results that we had. You know, and you can list a few things off, and then you tie it back to your really strong communication and personal skills. And this taught you to work with people from various different backgrounds. Okay? So that's a great one, right? You can do that. What else can we tie a mission to? Self-starter, right? You were hitting doors. Talk about the initiative and proactivity. Hitting doors. No one's like keeping tab to make sure you do it. It's all your own initiative. Talk about motivation, right? So, and again, all you got to do is share a little story, and then you're able to bring out a skill or attribute that you want them to take away. You can do this with a lot of stuff. You know, we could take all kinds of different jobs. If you've done door-to-door jobs, sales jobs, right? I did that for a couple of summers, selling door-to-door. I can tie that to communication skills. I could even tie it to organizational skills because I was a team leader once, right? I could easily tie it to leadership. I had a couple guys I was working with. Being decisive, especially with people on the door. You're constantly making quick, fast decisions and trying to read them, verbal and nonverbal cues. You know what I mean? So all these things, I mean, we can list jobs, but it's your job to go through your resume and think to yourself, after you've identified the principles that you think are important, to start linking things to these 5 things. Because again, we're going to try and take an offensive approach in our interview, not defensive. Okay? So, next thing, So we've linked it up, and that gets us to our next story, the next point where we share stories. Okay? The reason why stories do wonders is because it not only substantiates what you're saying, because anybody can claim like, oh yeah, I'm really hardworking. Oh yeah, I'm motivated. Leadership's important for you. I'm a natural leader, right? Anybody can claim that. But as soon as you provide a good example, and you're able to keep it short and concise, and bring out what was the obstacle, okay, in your story, and what was the obstacle, how did you overcome it, and what were the results? And you try to do that in maybe a minute. Now, sometimes if it's, depending on your interviewer, you get to a point where you can read your interviewer. Sometimes you might take the story a little bit longer, but it doesn't need to drag on forever, because the story is not the point. It's what was the takeaway, okay? So you always share stories. And one of the things stories do is they create feeling. It creates a feeling. And one thing I would say about interviewing is that at the end of the day, it's not what you say in an interview, it's how you make the interviewer feel. So sometimes I think people get caught up in trying to sound so professional and trying to be so grammatically correct and trying to make sure everything they say is so profound. Honestly, I like to throw that stuff all out the window and I just be myself, and I just am trying to be active and animated and, and stuff like that. And it works for me. And whatever your personality is, bring it out, but it's the feeling that you create, and stories really help out with that. Okay? So that leads us to our next point. We've shared a story, okay? And then this is probably the most critical point of the whole interviewing thing. And that is tying it all together. When I say tie, I like to say like connect the dots, because it's like you've given them a whole bunch of dots, and in your mind, you've clearly outlined a cat. Okay? It looks like a cat. You've given all these dots. And you think that they're taking away like, oh, that's obviously a cat, but you can't let them infer. You have to actually connect it and say, oh, by the way, this is a cat. Draw it out for them. So this is kind of what you do. You say, for example, when you got done sharing a story, then you can kind of wrap it up and connect it this way. You can do it a number of ways, but you can say like, what this means to you is, and tell them exactly what that means. Like, so you tell a good story and say, what this means to you is, you're getting somebody who has top-notch leadership skills. I was in all kinds of positions. I was working with, whatever it was, 40 different other service missionaries in my zone. And I was doing progress reports. I was watching over them. A lot of times you have to keep in mind, these guys have no economic benefit. Talk about like the motivating techniques I had to use. And so, you tell them exactly what it means to them, and you can just wrap it up and say, so I guarantee you if you give me this job, I bring you to the table just solid leadership skills or something like that. So you just tie it together. So you can say like what this means to you. You can say, let me think, sorry. You can also say, like, if you give me this opportunity, so you've told the stories, if you give me this opportunity, I'm going to bring really, or, my biggest strength is my organizational skills, or, I've really learned to be decisive. You can say, this is what I bring to the table. If I had the opportunity, this is what I would have. So there's a lot of ways to tie it in, but the point is, you want to let them know, from this experience, what I got was this. What I learned was this. What I developed was this. Okay? And you tell them the skill, and that's one of the critical skills they're looking for. One thing I would say is that you can't leave, one of the reasons it's important to connect the dots is you can't leave the interviewer to assume what to take away from that. Whenever you leave, and I'll just give this one caveat. I was actually, I worked for a bank out on Wall Street, and the bank's Credit Suisse, and it's a huge global investment bank. And while I was there, I volunteered to be on a recruiting team. So I did a whole bunch of interviewing from candidates from all over, specifically from Ivy League schools, but hundreds of candidates. So I did a lot of interviewing with these guys. And while doing this, you do learn a lot of strategies about interviewing because you just watch it over and over and over. But the thing is if when they tell you an experience and they don't connect the dots or they don't tell you what you're supposed to take away, you always assume the worst. And you have to assume the worst, right? Because you're not sure what exactly it implies, and you can't just give people the benefit of the doubt, because the fact that they didn't tell you might just mean that there was nothing to it, and there was nothing substantial about it. And so, you need to always make sure and do that, because they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. So let me just give you one example, right? If I say oh, listen, I'm the CEO of a company, I launched it, and the company's fully functioning and running now. Okay, let's just say I say that. What did you take away from that? You know, the thing is, and I'll tell you this much, and I saw some hands, but I'll answer it for you. If I have 5 hands, I'm going to get 5 different answers because you don't know exactly what to take away from it. Some of you guys might be thinking like, oh, he's really good at organizing or bringing things together. Somebody else might think, oh, he's got good leadership skills. Or someone else might think like, oh, this is like, you know, this is somebody who's, I don't know, decisive or whatever other quality. The point is, but you don't know exactly what to take away. So you might quickly think, oh, that's kind of impressive. But because you don't know what to take away, by the end of the interview, you've kind of forgotten and you don't take anything away. Okay? So that's why I feel like this is the most important thing, is telling them, connecting the dots, and don't let them infer what this exactly means. What does this experience imply? Okay? So, one thing I would say is, so before we launch into just a couple examples, one thing I would say is that, so first, we've identified the 5 skills. I'm just reviewing briefly. We've learned how to link our resume to it. So with every question they ask, we think to ourselves, okay, how can I take that question, answer it, and then spin it in a way to sell one of my qualities or skills? So that's what you're trying to do with every single question. You know, you can't wait. You'll find that in an interview that's 30 minutes, when it's actually going good and you're feeling like, wow, this interview is going good, I can tell my interviewer's liking this, you're going to find that you're only going to get 5 or 6 questions out because it ends up becoming more of a conversation rather than an interview. In fact, usually they'll just end up putting your resume down and just start talking, and they're really interested in that. Well, tell me, that's really interesting. Tell me more about the experience. You know, why were you doing that? That sounds so crazy. You know, and it ends up becoming more of a conversation, and the time's going to fly, and you're going to find out that you don't get a lot of time to sell yourself. You have to take every opportunity to sell yourself. Okay, so every question they ask, we're going to try and learn to spin it, to bring out some experience from your resume, or sometimes I'll even say, you know what, let me tell you something. There's an experience I had. It's not on my resume, and you can still go on to tell about it. I did this, this, and this, and I picked up some really strong qualities or whatever skills that really helped me in a position that just like this. Okay, so what do you do though? And this is a kind of the boat I bet a lot of you are in. Is you're saying to yourself, well, what do I do if I don't have any real significant experience? Okay, I don't feel like I've done anything that great. First of all, I want to throw out there that I hadn't done anything that great. And I was hoping to take stepping stones to finally get to a job that was kind of like the job that I really wanted to get. And I was fortunate to get it right off the bat. But my point was, I didn't come from anything special. Pretty average. And so it's not what you've done. I mean, hopefully you've done some things that are like relatively impressive or that you've learned some things from. But it's all about packaging what you've done. It's all about marketing it. So I want to give a couple examples. Let's just take, for example, like I had been talking to my brother, and we were just thinking of all these random crazy jobs and how you could still tie it in to sell yourself. And we were saying, let's just take, for example, that you were a janitor. Okay, you're a janitor cleaning the restrooms around campus. Okay, you've probably either know someone or maybe you've done it yourself. So I had a couple friends that did that. Okay, that sounded like a horrible job. And you're thinking to yourself, that's not something I would want to put on my resume. So maybe you decide to, maybe you don't. But in the interview, let's just say they're talking about it and they're like, oh, what's this? You know, you were a janitor. You know, you could say to yourself, there's a number of ways you could take that. But let's just say that you wanted to tie it into something like initiative, proactive, self-starter, that kind of concept, right? And you say, you know what? Yeah, you know, at first glance, this experience might not look like a lot. But let me tell you something. I actually gained some really strong skills and developed some attributes that I think are very valuable to you. Every single morning, I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I was getting up, and I was, you know, beating it out to the campus and working my head off, and we had to get so much done. You know, we only had like 3 or 4 hours to get it all done, and we were working our heads off and cleaning. And one thing I learned is that I don't have pride. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get the thing done. I have tons of initiative. Believe me, if I'm willing to wake up that early to get up and do what I have to do to pay for my school, I tell you one thing, you know, if you give me a job, that's the kind of initiative and, you know, whatever. That's the kind of, you know, that's the kind of person I am. I'm highly proactive, I know how to get it done. I'll wake up and I'll do whatever it takes. And, that's what I bring to the table. Or just something like that, I don't know if that's the best way to handle it. But there's a number of different positions. Like, what's another position around campus? Does anyone here have a campus job? Like what, for example?
Secretary.
Secretary. Okay, fantastic. So what could you talk about in your secretary? What could you talk about?
I do something different every day.
Fantastic. So why don't we could hit on creative and organizational skills. Let's just hit organization. So I'm just like, let me just take a shot at this because I'm rusty at this stuff too. But you finally get to the point where you get into the mode of interviewing. But you could just say something like, you know what? I know there's 100 secretaries out there, and I know you could look at that and easily pass this over. Let me tell you something. I was a secretary, and I had so many things flying at me that I was working for. Normally, you got a secretary working for one guy. I was getting to the point where I was handling 2 loads at one time. And let me just tell you some of the projects I was doing. Just ripped through a couple of projects, but here's the thing that I learned from that. One thing I got from that was my organizational skills. I'm telling you, I was able to take on twice the load as any other secretary because I developed organizational skills. I learned how to use the technology. I was always writing things down. I was quick. I was always thinking like outside of the box, not just, he gave me a little project, I'm just going to check off the box. I was thinking, how can I take this to the next level? What's he going to do with this next? And maybe I can take it to the next step. And I'll tell you, the organizational skills were key in this. If you give me a job, those are the kinds of skills that I bring to the table. Or something like that, okay? So you take something like that and they're walking away saying, wow, that's quite the secretarial job. You know what I mean? So you can, you don't have to have the most impressive stuff in the world. You just have to be able to market it, okay? Now, let me just say one thing, one caveat. Resumes and networking go to hand in hand. They're very important because they will get you an interview, okay? But the interview is what always gets you the job. The interview is like, I feel it's the most critical step in the whole career preparation. Because at the end of the day, it's your personality that they're going to like. They're either going to say, he's a good fit, she's a great fit for our culture, they has the skills I'm looking for, and they're going to look past all kinds of shortcomings. They're going to look past lack of experience. If you're able to communicate the skills that they're looking for and they like you as a person. And generally they will if you're able to kind of hit on the things that they want. And again, I'll say, my resume when I went up to New York, it was at best average. If I had to grade it, now that I've seen all kinds of resumes of people coming on, I would have given myself now in hindsight a B minus at best. So, you really got to get in on the interview. Now, I'm not trying to say you can go out with horrible resumes and get any job you want. It's all a critical part. But what I feel is that the interview is what ultimately will get you the job. Okay? I will say one thing. I had a good buddy who was here. He's here at BYU-Idaho. I met him because he networked and contacted me while I was out in New York, and we were on the phone number of hours helping him get ready for the interview and get his resume ready. And he flew out there and he showed all kinds of initiative, which in my opinion is just that's one of the critical for getting a job, is just taking initiative to get in front of people. Anyways, and he came out there, and this kid, not a great GPA by any means. Mediocre. I mean, he did a good job at making his resume sharp, but not good experience at all. But he came out there, and I was able to help him get a couple interviews. And he went in there, and he just nailed those interviews. He did so well. And he landed a job that he felt like was going to be his dream job. He didn't think he was ever going to be fortunate enough to come right out of school and get the job. But the point was he paid the price. He took the hours to sit there and practice interviewing, get his resume ready. And we will talk about some good techniques to how you can go about practicing interviewing. But my point is, don't shortchange yourself, right? If you have the vision, run with it. How are we doing? Okay, good. Okay, so let me just go like this. There's one more point. If you're in marketing, right? If you're a marketing person, and if you're not in marketing, you're also welcome to do this. But you don't have to, because some people view it as a little bit aggressive, I guess. But in closing the sale, right, basically what happens is you get done with the interview, and they said, well, do you have any questions for me? And you say, yeah, I'm really curious. What are the top two or three skills that you view in an ideal employee? What is it you feel are the most critical, important qualities? And they'll list off, well, I think really it's about being a leader and having solid interpersonal skills. That's what I feel is the most important. And then what you do is you say something like, you know what? That's great. If that's what you're looking for, we have a fit. In fact, I know we've got a fit, because let me tell you something. My leadership skills, I'll just tell you briefly, when I was on my mission, just tell them really quick and say, I really developed my leadership skills with my what else did I say? Communication, interpersonal skills. Let me tell you, doing door-to-door sales, was the single best experience I learned in working with people, overcoming obstacles, coming together to come up with a solution and all kinds of stuff. If that's what's important for you, I know I've got it. That's what you're looking for. You've answered my question. There's a fit here. Is there anything holding you back from offering me this job? That's a little bit aggressive. Maybe you don't have to end with that question. You could just end it by saying, I know there's a fit here, and I tell you, I'm really excited for this opportunity, and I hope you'll give me a chance, or something. But you could even just end it saying, because that's what you do in sales, right? You always close the sale. So, of course, they're not going to say, no, there's nothing to hold me back. Just sign the dotted line. They'll say, well, yeah, I got to talk to my manager and boss and this and that, but you seem highly qualified, and we'll be excited to get back to you. But they got to be saying to themselves, oh, dang, that's pretty good. He just closed me, okay, because they know all about closing. So, again, in the closing, what you do is you ask them to identify the top maybe 1 or 2 qualities or skills they're looking for. They name it, and you say, you know what, if that's what you're looking for, we got to fit here, because that's one of my strong points. Give them a quick story and say, there's a fit. I'd love to have this opportunity, and I can tell that I'll mesh with the culture. You've answered my questions, and I look forward to hearing back from you, or something. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think it was you, wasn't it, Jason, that came in yesterday? That one of the questions I asked him, I said, do you have any questions for me? And he said, who is the best employee you've ever had, and why were they the best?
That's fantastic.
And it was basically the same question asked for you.
Good job. Look at that. He knows what he's doing.
Thank you.
No, I don't know. All right, well.
Makes me look good.
Good job. So that's closing is really good. Let's go like this then. I want to hit on just a few things now. So you kind of got the general format of a strategy, and let me just hit on a couple things, and then I'm going to try and summarize it all one more time for you. I want to lastly talk about how you can go about preparing yourself, right? Then I want to talk about some of the question types you might get. And lastly, I just want to give you some final pieces of advice for the interview, okay? How to prepare. The way that I go about preparing for an interview, regardless of whether or not I have the interview set up or whether it's just an industry of interest and I know it's going to take me dozens and dozens of hours of preparation, so I'm just starting early, this is how I go about it. I print off a bunch of questions from the internet, maybe top 50 questions. I don't care what the questions are. Just get a bunch of good questions. Maybe look on the website, because what you'll find is we're not taking a defensive approach, okay? Because whatever question they look, we're going to learn to spin it. We're just using these questions as preparation to come up with stories and to get the rusty gears going and flowing. Because it's been a while since I've prepped for interviewing. But every time I need to interview, because I've changed roles a couple times at our bank, and I just interviewed to get into an MBA school, and each time I do that, I spend, the first time I did it, I spent like dozens and dozens of hours, but now it takes me about, maybe 6-10 hours to get the gears going. But then once they're greased, it's like they're going, and somebody throws a question at you, and it's just like, bring it on. You feel bulletproof. You're just like spinning it and doing anything you want and bringing out skills and qualities. And so it's really important to get those like juices flowing. So this is one way to go about it. Print off your questions and have a friend. It doesn't matter who it is. I don't care who's helping you practice interviewing. Even if you're doing it on your own. If you can't get a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, roommate to help you, what you do is have them ask the question out loud. And when it's my wife, she reads the question, then I say, keep reading your book. Don't even listen to me. What I do is I answer every question 3 times. The first time, it's like brainstorming. So I just start talking out loud. And I don't stop and correct myself. And I'm just talking and I'm rambling. I'm not even trying to make it super coherent. I'm sharing an example, share another example, and my mind's kind of just like getting ideas of ways to answer that question. And once I've rambled on for maybe a couple minutes, then I stop and say, okay, ask it again, and this time I'm going to try to actually answer it in some kind of coherent way, because I thought that was a good example, and I could bring that skill out. Okay, this is great. Answer me the question again. So she asked me the question again, even if it's something from my resume or off this sheet, right? Because a lot of times their questions are just coming right off their resume. Oh, what's this? What did you get from that, or whatever, you know? So she asked me a second time, and now I try to actually answer it coherently. But I never stop and say, oh, let me try that again. Okay? Don't let yourself, because when I try and do like a perfect answer the first time, I get froze up. I get nervous. I keep thinking like, oh, that sounds horrible, and I don't get the creative juices going. So I don't like anybody to critique me the first time I answer it. The second time, I want a little bit of criticism. Okay? Is my story not right? Should I make it more concise? Maybe there's something I could have brought out a little more. Whatever. Gives a little criticism, and then I do it a third time, and this time I try and nail it. And I try to keep it short and concise. And when you end an interviewing question, don't ever just keep rattling on until you finally just fade out. You want to end it strong and cut it off and then just stare them in the eyes. And it's almost eerie. You're like, ooh, you know, and they're fiddling looking for the next question. So, but don't you leave a really strong impression when you cut it fast and say that's, you know, and I have solid leadership skills, and then just stop and stare at them or whatever, right? Or sometimes you'll even say like, they'll get done, you'll get done, and you've answered it, and you say, well, does that answer your question? And you stare them right in the face, and you're like shaking your head. And, you know, as you ask that, especially when you know you answered their question, right? And they're kind of like, yeah, that was good, you know, and they go to the next one. But anyway, so I do everything 3 times. It does you no good to practice answering questions in your mind. You can't do that. Because to think of an answer and to verbally say it are 2 completely different skills, and it's so much harder to verbally say it. I don't even practice just thinking in my mind. I only talk out loud. Okay? So every time you practice, and believe me, I've done lots of interviewing just on my own where I'm just sitting in my room and I ask the question to myself and I answer it, critique it myself, do it a second time, critique it again, and try and get it like perfect the third time. And then you go on to the next question. Now, again, this isn't to try and think of every question they could possibly answer. You start to get all kinds of stories. Okay? You're developing all kinds of stories. You're getting the gears going. You're getting those skills honed. You're learning how to flip the questions and tie it back, all that kind of stuff. Okay? That's the purpose. Do 50 of them, and then have someone go down each bullet point on your resume and say, tell me about this. And by the way, sometimes, let's say that you've already talked about like leadership, and they bring up the mission, and you're used to tying that to leadership. Tie it to one of the other ones, okay? Because we already showed you that you could tie it to a number of them. So now this time say like, oh, I already talked about leadership. Let me talk about interpersonal skills this time. Okay? Does that make sense? One last thing on how to prepare. No, that's good enough. We got to move on. Okay? So that's basically how I prepare for an interview. I just go through tons of questions. I get stories ready. I try and get, try to get quick on my toes. Try to get so that I can be very flexible. And you'll find that once you come up with 20 good stories, you can use those for just about every question they ask. So it works out well. Okay, let's talk about question types. Here's one. So here's the thing. There's like 3 or 4 questions that you have to have answers for. Because in one form or another, you're going to get these questions. And at least if you don't exactly get this question, the answer to these questions you'll use in every interview. Okay? Here's a couple important ones. I'll tell you the single most important in a sec. First one is, what do you want to do and why? You have to have a perfect answer for that. Now, what do you want to do is not hard. You know, I'm really interested in doing this. And if you've done a little bit of research, and having a mentor in the industry is just about key. In fact, if you really want to break into industry and get a good job, I don't know how you can't do it without a mentor. Mentors are awesome because they give you all kinds of feedback. They kind of teach you some stuff. So then when you go in there, you sound like you actually have a little bit of knowledge, not that you're absolutely clueless. Okay? So what do you want to do and why? So for her, it was a television producer. You know, I really want to be a television producer. And for a number of reasons. Actually, let me just tell you. And list 2 or 3 reasons why. Okay? They don't have to be. In fact, here's one thing that most people do. This is something I've wanted. This is what most people say. This is a dream I've had ever since I was a kid. Okay? Usually that's not true to start with. And B, I don't think it's a good answer even if it is true. Because even if it were true and it's something you decided to do ever since you were 5 years old, the thing that's coming to my mind as an interviewer is, okay, you've wanted to do this for the last, let's say, 20 years or whatever. Tell me what you've been doing over the last 20 years to get yourself ready for this one moment, because you've had 20 years to prepare for this. This is something you've always wanted to do. Okay, so I kind of avoid that. just give just think of very specific reasons why. Maybe say, because maybe I had some experience doing this, and it brought out some of my skills and strengths, especially my organizational skills and my leadership skills, and it was really fascinating me. I'm not going to answer it for you. You have to think of why exactly you're interested in what you are. Have a good answer. Okay? Another thing you're going to get is, why should we hire you over the next guy? Okay? Another form this might come in is, like, why should we hire over the next guy? Or, how are you going to add value? Or why do you think you would be an important member of our team? Or whatever it is, they can phrase that question in various different ways. But the gist is, what's so special about you, kind of thing. How are you going to answer that question? Well, that's easy, right? Pick one of them. In fact, I'd pick the one that you feel most confident in selling. So whatever it is, and say, listen, I have a number of key skills and attributes I feel really fit for your job, but there's one important that I feel like gives me an edge. And you don't have to talk about your competition. You don't have to say like other people this. Just sell yourself. Just talk about it. Say, I am probably the most proactive person you will ever meet. Let me tell you some of the stuff I've done. Tell a quick story and just say, if you're looking someone who's got all kinds of initiative, somebody who you hand a project to who doesn't need lots of hand-holding, who's going to run with it, come back with just a really strong, solid end product, I'm your man. And that's why you should hire me. And just stop and look at them. Whatever. But you need to have, why should we hire over the next guy? Why are you special kind of thing. Another one is, especially coming from BYU-Idaho, a question you'll frequently get is, why do you want to work in this city? Especially if you're looking for a big city like Houston, Chicago, New York, LA. Let me tell you, you have to dispel their concern. Their concern is, look, you're coming from a little podunk school. You don't know what it's like in the big city. And the last thing we want to do is have you jump in and you don't know what you're getting into, and all of a sudden you're not cut out for the big city. Okay, personally, I think that's a silly concern, because I grew up in Sugar City, okay? That's about as podunk as you get. And I went to New York, right? But still, it's a concern. So how do you dispel it? Just tell them some of the reasons why you think you're cut out. Just say, I got to be honest with you. So when people say, no, why New York? I see you come from Idaho, why New York? And I say, I really, really enjoy the big city. It's fast-paced here. This is the center of the finance universe. I love the excellence. Honestly, I love having lots of pressure and working on the pressure and excelling and rising above it. I think big cities are awesome. I really excel in this type of environment. This is exactly where I want to work. Okay? All you're trying to do is dispel their concern. So that's another one I would be aware of. Another thing is, some questions are, a lot of the times, like we group two general types of categories. There's fit questions versus technical questions. Fit are usually like, get to know who you are, your personality, your skills. Do you fit with our culture? What we're looking for? Technical are more like, do you have the knowledge base? Okay? Like, do you really, like, well, I guess it is what it is. It's technical, right? It's like, do you have the expertise? What kind of experience have you had in this specific area? Okay? For technical questions, they're kind of hard to prep for. You either do or don't know the answers. Okay? Fit questions are kind of more what we're talking about. One thing I will say, one piece of advice, be careful when you're selling yourself. Be careful about selling how deep your knowledge runs. You can always oversell yourself in like attributes, qualities, skills. And then if they try and test you, then you provide an example and show them like the results and how it came across. But when someone tests you in knowledge, you never want to say, oh, I know so much in that area. Because they can start quizzing you, and they will always know more than you do, and they'll bury you. Okay? So I usually take a little more. I think it's very important in an interview to be very confident, but to also be very, not arrogant is the key. Confident but not arrogant. Okay? So you can be confident. Be very confident in yourself and your skills, but don't ever act like you know everything. In fact, I oftentimes will say in an interview, one thing about me that you don't have to worry about, while I've developed some really strong skills and stuff, I'm someone who is very eager to learn. I don't have all the answers out there, but I tell you what, I'm someone who just, I know how to go and find answers and find solutions, and I'm eager to learn from other people, and I'm not someone that's arrogant, So that's something that's important. So anyways, be careful about selling your knowledge, because they might test you on that. You can always say, look, I have a good solid base, but there's still lots I can learn, and that's why this job is just like so fascinating to me. I'm really looking to get my hands dirty and learn tons, or something like that. So one other thing on the, I was going to say something on the fit questions, but I have like a short-term memory problem. I can't remember. So moving on. A lot of times, another type of question, sometimes you'll get situational questions. So they'll throw out a situation for you. For example, before I even give you the example, just so you're aware, situational questions oftentimes come back to this skill right here. This is what they're trying to test. More often than not, that's what they come to, but oftentimes they don't. So what they're going to say is, here's the scenario. You're on a team. You got a big project. You're the project manager, and one of your team members drops the ball or is not pulling his weight. Okay, one of your team members is not pulling his weight at all, and you could see that you're not going to get the project done in time. How do you handle it? Okay, how are you going to answer that? So first, what I would do for that, I would answer it real quickly, but then I would just pick something. So obviously, this is what they're driving for. Say, you know what? One thing that's you could just start to give them a scenario like, I think it's really important to, and tell them your philosophy. You need to work with people, but at the end of the day, you can't force them. You need to try and bring out their skills and strengths. And I don't know, I'm just kind of making up the answer. But you could think of a good answer. And then you might even just say, I think it's key to have really strong interpersonal skills. I have had a number of jobs that helped me develop that. But in a situation like this, being a good team player is key. And really learning to work with people, not necessarily being a pushover. You got to be, if you know you have the right answer, sometimes you need to stand up for it. But you also got to learn to put yourself in someone else's shoes and have empathy or whatever. You can kind of twist it. But there's situational questions. Sometimes you'll get those. But you can still bring out an attribute and sell it. Okay? So I answer the question real quick and then still try and bring out an attribute out of it. Because I'm not taking a defensive approach. I'm taking an offensive approach to my interview. Weakness questions. Tell me your biggest weakness, your 3 biggest weaknesses. Be careful, the typical response is, tell them a strength that I'm trying to make look like a weakness. I personally don't like that. I like to tell them a genuine weakness. Just don't make sure it's one of the top 5. Okay? Pick something that's down like number 99. So something that's maybe a genuine weakness, but what you want to do is say, you know what? One thing about me is that I like to come clean with a weakness so to show them that I'm very self-aware, but then immediately show that A, you're aware of it, and that you try and compensate for it, or you have ways of compensating it. So I'm just trying to think of one off the top of my head. Maybe you're not a good multitasker. Okay, I don't know. If this is a critical one for the job you're looking for, don't use that one. But let's just pretend it's not. Okay, so sometimes I'm not the best multitasker because I can get focused on a project and I get into it and I get excited and then I'm like, oh, I got something else going on. But I tell you what, I'm aware of this and I'm thinking, and there's ways I'm coming up to compensate with that. And so what I try and do is I try and make sure that I don't even have the answer, but you can show if you have ways to compensate for your weakness. That's great. So you've taken something that is supposed to be a defensive question and now you're trying to bring out another strength. Okay? So I like to come clean with weakness questions, but just think of a couple. Okay, next, pieces of advice. Going to have to hurry with this. Okay, I already talked about creating a feeling. That's the whole purpose. You're trying to create a feeling. Don't get caught up in your grammar. I mean, try and be professional, but this is my general attitude. When you get ready for an interview, practice and practice and practice. Practice 100 times over. Get techniques, everything down. But when it comes to the actual time and you're there, you forget everything that I've talked about, everything that you've ever learned. Just forget it all. Don't sit there and say to yourself, oh, we asked this question. I had these 3 bullet points. I got for the first 2. What was that third one? Just forget it all. Be yourself, and hopefully a lot of it's come natural. And just go in there and just totally be yourself, and it resonates. Okay? So at that point, when you're actually in the interview, it's no more about tricks and strategies and techniques and everything else. Just go in there and be yourself and try to sell yourself and bring out the skills and qualities. But that's why sometimes you don't want to sit there and say to yourself like, ooh, I want to make sure I sound so like, I want to make sure every word has just the right impact and everything. I would just talk like you normally talk. That's my opinion. So I don't know if everyone would agree with that. Another thing is you'll notice in this interviewing seminar, I haven't talked at all about dressing professional and stuff. That all goes without saying, okay? I don't think we need to talk about that. Anytime you Google on the internet, interview preparation, the first thing they talk about is the handshake, eye contact, looking the part. I think that kind of goes without saying. Okay. Return missionaries. For all of you that have served missions, I just want to tell you something. You have a huge advantage going into interviews. Your interpersonal skills are so much stronger than a lot of your competition. So go in with confidence, especially if you pray to have the Spirit with you. The Spirit will bring all kinds of stories. If you've prepped, that scripture says, Spirit will bring to our mind the things to our remembrance. If you've prepared and you have examples and stories, I'm telling you, just the right stories come to your mind. Just the ones that you need to click with your interviewer. And especially as a return missionary, you have great interpersonal skills and you've talked with people. So I just want you to know, go in with confidence into an interview. Another piece of advice, get a mentor. I talked to 2 or 3 friends from BYU-Idaho that got solid jobs. One of them got one with Boeing. He's like a superstar out there now. He's doing a great job. Just one's with Johnson & Johnson. He's also doing fantastic in his job. Another guy's on Wall Street who's working close to me. And almost without fail, they say the key is to get a mentor. Find someone in the industry, network, find someone and start to talk to them, learn more about the industry, learn about how do I break in, how do I go about, and just like maybe they'll review your resume, stuff like that. I think mentors are key. Another piece of advice, go on these expeditions that the school goes to these different cities. One of the guys who went out to New York, he said he went out on one of those excursions. I don't know if it cost him $400 or $500. He went there and came back and said it completely changed him. He said, I couldn't even look at things the same way because he was going out and talking to, 3 or 4 days of talking to all these professionals. And he came back, he says, I didn't look at my classes the same way. I didn't look at preparation the same way. And it motivated him so much that he said that $400 or $500 was pennies compared to the job he ended up getting and the vision that it gave him. So I would just say the investment you put into these excursions, if the city's going out to, or if the university's taking a group of students out to one of these places that you're interested in going, find the money, dig it out of the pocket, and go. Because I just feel like you're going to learn so much from those experiences. One other thing is make sure and try and develop like a 5-year plan. So like, what's your dream job? Okay? You might not get that right off the bat, but have a goal, because when you're striving towards a goal, even when you're starting to take steps towards it, what you'll find is it may even change, but when you're working towards something, it comes out in the interviews, it comes out in the way that you prepare, it helps you try and it tries to help you to focus your networking and stuff like that. So like for me, it was like I'd love to get on Wall Street and start trading. Like I traded commodities, and that was something that I always wanted to do. And I got on Wall Street. I wasn't immediately trading. I was doing something else, and then after 2 years, I got to switch over to that role, and it was a great experience for me. And I did that for 2 more years, so I was there for a total of 4. But the 5-year plan, I think, is key. Think, what is your dream job, and start working towards it. You might get it right out of school. You probably won't. So find an intermediate job that's really going to help prepare you or give you a good resume building experience, and then maybe after 2 or 3 years, you launch into what you really want to do. Okay. Last thing, as I would say, is one of the biggest, let's put it this way. I think a lot of kids from BYU-Idaho, we come from a Mormon community and stuff, I think sometimes we know that families are important and this and that, so we get scared to pay our dues for a job. And the only thing I would say is we're all young, right? And we're all just barely launching to our careers. And in any career, you are going to pay your dues one way or the other. You're not going to get out of it. So you can either take it and pay it up front and work really hard up front and work a job that's going to work you hard and maybe a place that you don't want to live, like if it's out east or wherever it is. You're going to do that, or you can spread it over 10 years and take all these little cruddy jobs that you don't like what you're doing, you're not that happy, they don't pay very much, but after 10 years you finally get to a place where you're like, oh, okay, now I'm finally getting a decent salary and I'm doing something I kind of like. Either way, you're going to pay your dues, and I say pay it up front. So don't be scared to work hard. I mean, when I first took my job, I was married, and I was working 6 days a week, and I was working about 16 hours a day, I was getting in at 7 o'clock, and it wasn't uncommon that I was coming home at 11 o'clock or midnight. But I did that for 2 years, and it was really hard, and I worked on Saturdays too, and I told them there's no way I'm going to work on Sunday, so I got Sunday break, and I went right back in Monday morning, worked 16 hours, but it paid off, and it opened all kinds of jobs and opportunities for me. And I did it in 2 years, and now my dues are kind of paid, and now I have all kinds of interesting opportunities. And I'm not saying that, I have all the answers or anything like that, but I'm just saying pay your dues. Don't be scared to do that, okay? That's the last piece of advice. So let me summarize, and we'll wrap it up. So what we talked about today, right, is first, interviewing is what ultimately gets you a job. So get that interview. Learn to market yourself. We do that by first identifying the top 5 skills. We want to focus on just those 5 skills because they hold most of the weight. We're going to take an offensive approach. Next thing is we link our resume, right, to those skills. Next, we share stories with the questions they ask. It's maybe not appropriate to share a story with every question, but most questions you can share a story and bring out one of your skills or attributes. Okay? And then that's where we connect the dots. We tie it all together. If you're in marketing or you like it, try and close the sell at the end by telling them that there's a good fit there. You're excited for the job. You want the job, and you know that it'll work well together. We talked about how to go about preparing, right? The different types of question types you get, and one last thing I guess I would say is, if there was one thing, if you walked away and forgot everything we talked about today, if there was one key takeaway I wish you'd take, it was that I hope that somehow we can instill the vision on the students. Because the students from BYU-Idaho that do have the vision that they can go out there and get the jobs, they're the ones that are getting them. Because I promise you, your competition from all the other schools around the nation, they're not a lot better than you. I don't think they are better than you. I really don't. And it's just take the time now. I talked to so many people who said my only regret, I can say this for my own personal, is that I didn't start when I was a sophomore getting ready, right? I wish I hadn't waited till I was a senior. It would have been a lot easier, and I would have maybe had some fun internships. And I think internships are a great way to break in industries because they don't, otherwise where they wouldn't take a chance on you, they're bringing you in just for a kind of an experience, and at the end, 9 times out of 10, they'll give you a job offer and you've broken into a company or an industry that you never hoped you could have. So industries are a great way to get in because they're willing to take a chance on you, whereas with a full-time employee, it's a lot harder to. So anyways, that's kind of my thing. I just say go forth with confidence and get yourself ready for the interview. Thanks for coming today.